You ever have one of those moments where you realize you're about to be pushed past your breaking point? Where someone pokes at you over and over again until you feel like the universe itself is daring you to finally fight back? That's exactly where I found myself, and I'll never forget the day things boiled over. Because what started as a nightmare of disrespect turned into the most satisfying revenge I could have ever dreamed up. And the funny part? My bulls were the heroes of the story. Let me back up. My name's not important, but what you need to know is that I grew up on this land. Acres and acres of it, rolling fields, a small stretch of woods, and an old barn that stood longer than most people in this town. This land was my sanctuary. My father worked it, my grandfather before him. And when it finally came into my hands, I swore to protect it from anyone who thought they could trample on it. And then the HOA came into the picture. Now, technically, my land was right on the border of this cookie-cutter suburban development that popped up like mushrooms after rain. All those neat little identical houses, perfect lawns, and of course the self-appointed royalty, the HOA board. You know the type. They smile with too many teeth, they drop little friendly reminders in your mailbox about the color of your fence, and they strut around like they own the ground beneath your boots. I never signed up to be part of their circus because my land was independent. But that didn't stop them from trying to pull me into their nonsense every chance they got, and leading the charge was Karen. Not her real name, but let's just say if there was ever a talking stereotype of entitlement, it was her. Perfectly coiffed blonde bob, designer sunglasses permanently perched on her head like a crown, and a voice that could curdle milk. She was the president of the HOA, self-appointed, of course, and she made it her personal mission to remind me that my land was an eyesore compared to her pristine suburban kingdom. At first, it was little things. She'd leave notes on my gate about unsightly farm equipment or overgrown grass. Once, she even had the audacity to suggest I should paint my barn a more neighborhood-friendly color. I laughed in her face. This barn had been standing for over 70 years, weathered and proud, and I wasn't about to slather it in pastel blue just because she thought it would match her shutters. But her complaints didn't stop. They escalated. She tried to tell me my bulls were a safety hazard because their mooing disturbed the peace. As if the sound of nature was somehow worse than the screeching of leaf blowers and yapping lapdogs echoing through her cul-de-sac. Still, I tried to ignore her. I had better things to do than get dragged into her power trips. But ignoring Karen is like ignoring a mosquito. She just kept buzzing, biting, pushing. And then one day, she crossed the line so far there was no going back. It was a Saturday morning, bright and sunny. The kind of day when the dew still clings to the grass and the air smells like earth and promise. I walked out to check on my bulls, feed them, and give them a once-over like I always did. But as I got closer to the edge of my land, I noticed something unusual. Cars, lots of cars, parked haphazardly along the road, spilling onto the shoulder, engines still warm. I frowned. This wasn't normal. I followed the noise, and that's when I saw it. My land, my private land, was crawling with people. Tents popping up like weeds, lawn chairs unfolded, kids running wild, smoke from portable grills curling into the air. At least 100 people were setting up camp on my property like it was some kind of public park. And standing in the middle of it all, clipboard in hand, was none other than Karen. I swear my vision went red. I marched right up to her, my boots pounding against the ground. "What the hell is this?" I demanded. Karen turned with that fake smile plastered across her face. "Oh, there you are. We decided to host a little neighborhood camping event. Isn't it fun? Such a great way to bring the community together. On my land." I spat the words. "Well," she said with a shrug, "it's just sitting here. It's not like you're using it for anything important. And besides, the HOA voted on it. Majority rules." I almost laughed. Almost, except the rage boiling in my chest was too strong. "I'm not part of your damn HOA. You don't get to vote on what happens on my property." She gave me that condescending look, the kind that makes you want to clench your fists until your knuckles crack. "Oh, don't be such a grump. It's just for one night. Honestly, you should be thanking us for putting your land to good use. And don't worry, we'll clean up after ourselves." I looked around. Kids were already trampling my grass, people had set up tents dangerously close to my fences, and someone was digging a fire pit. A fire pit. Near my bulls. My hands shook with fury. "You've got 10 minutes, I growled, "to pack this up and get off my land." Karen actually laughed. She laughed in my face like I was some kind of joke. "Oh, please. What are you going to do? Call the cops?" Good luck with that. The sheriff's department already knows about this, and they're fine with it. We're just neighbors having fun. I didn't believe her for a second, but the smugness dripping off her words lit something in me. I knew right then and there that talking wasn't going to solve this. These people didn't respect me, my land, or my boundaries, and if Karen thought she could steamroll me with her HOA army, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I turned on my heel and walked back toward the barn, every step heavy with purpose. My bulls were restless, pacing in their pens, snorting and tossing their heads. They could sense my mood. Animals always can. And that's when the idea hit me. A dangerous, wild, perfect idea. See, my bulls aren't your average lazy pasture ornaments. These are strong, muscular beasts, bred from generations of stock with fire in their veins. They're not mean, but they don't take kindly to strangers invading their space. And with the way those campers were setting up right against the fence, it wouldn't take much to give them the scare of their lives. I stood by the gate, running my hand along the rough wood, and thought about everything Karen had done. Every note, every insult, every smug little laugh. And now this, trespassing on my land, inviting an entire army of freeloaders to do the same. Enough was enough. I swung the gate open. The bulls charged out like thunder, hooves pounding, nostrils flaring. They tore across the field, a wall of muscle and fury. And the moment the campers saw them, chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as people scrambled to grab their things. Tents collapsed, chairs toppled, coolers spilled. Kids shrieked, parents shouted, grills tipped over. It was pure pandemonium. My bulls didn't even touch anyone. They didn't have to. Just the sight of them barreling forward was enough to send 1,000 wannabe campers running for their lives. And right in the middle of it all, Karen stood frozen, her clipboard clutched like a shield, her mouth hanging open in shock. That image alone was worth every second of trouble she'd caused me. But this was only the beginning. Because once you humiliate a woman like Karen, she doesn't just tuck her tail and leave. No, she comes back swinging. And I was ready for her. When the last of the campers finally fled my field, leaving behind a mess of scattered chairs, abandoned coolers, and trampled grass, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the end of it. My bulls had done their job spectacularly. The land was cleared in less than 10 minutes, and the only sounds left were the bulls snorting triumphantly and the rustle of the wind in the trees. I leaned against the fence, arms crossed, and watched Karen stomp away in her designer sandals, muttering under her breath about lawsuits and property rights. But if there's one thing I learned about people like her, it's that humiliation doesn't kill them. It feeds them. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got my first taste of the retaliation. I woke up Monday morning to find bright orange flyers plastered on my gate, stapled to my fence, even tucked under my truck's windshield wipers. "Notice of violation," they read in bold, self-important letters. The HOA had voted that my bulls were a public nuisance. They also claimed my barn was structurally unsound and demanded I tear it down for the safety of the neighborhood. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. They had no authority over me, and they knew it. But Karen didn't care about authority. She cared about appearances, and she wanted to break me with a flood of paper, threats, and petty harassment. The next week, I noticed my mailbox leaning at a funny angle. When I went to check, I found it had been deliberately smashed. Not by a passing car either. The dents were too precise. And a day after that, someone called animal control to report that my bulls were being neglected. Imagine the nerve. The officer who showed up took one look at my herd, glossy coats, strong builds, plenty of food and water, and rolled his eyes so hard I thought they'd stick in the back of his head. "We get calls from her all the time," he muttered as he climbed back into his truck. Karen was escalating. And every new stunt she pulled only hardened my resolve, so I started documenting everything. Every flyer, every smashed mailbox, every false report. I set up trail cameras on my property, hidden in the trees to catch anyone sneaking around. And most importantly, I started planning, because if Karen wanted a war, she was going to get one. It all came to a head about 3 weeks later. I came home from town to find a crowd of HOA members gathered at the edge of my land, Karen in the center like some twisted queen bee. They'd brought folding chairs, coolers, even a microphone hooked up to a tiny portable speaker. And right there on my property line, Karen was giving a speech, This land is wasted, she was saying, her voice sharp and smug. It could be a community park or a clubhouse or even just open space for our children to play. But instead, it's being hoarded by someone who refuses to cooperate. Someone who endangers us all with dangerous animals and unsafe structures, the crowd murmured in agreement. I could feel my fists clenching. But then she said the line that sealed her fate. That's why, starting next weekend, we'll be holding a community-wide campout right here. Everyone is invited. And he, she pointed toward my house without even saying my name, can't stop us. The crowd cheered, and my blood ran cold, then hot, then steady with a calm I hadn't felt before. She wanted to invite 1,000 people this time? Fine, I'd give her exactly what she asked for. For the next few days, I worked quietly. I reinforced the fences in certain places, guiding the bulls into a section of pasture that opened directly toward the field Karen had chosen for her circus. I cleared out any hazards that might hurt the animals if they stampeded, and I made sure my cameras were aimed perfectly, because this time I wasn't just scaring them. I was going to record every second of their chaos. The weekend came, and with it, a caravan of cars, SUVs, and even a few rented RVs. My land looked like a tailgate party for some massive sports event. Tents sprang up by the dozen, kids shrieked, music blasted from portable speakers. And Karen? She strutted around like she owned the place, barking orders into her megaphone, her clipboard flashing in the sunlight. I stayed out of sight until the sun dipped low and the campfires flared to life. The smell of smoke and overcooked hot dogs drifted on the breeze. People were laughing, drinking, making themselves comfortable on land that wasn't theirs, and then, when the timing felt perfect, I moved. The gate swung open with a satisfying creak. My bulls, restless and eager, surged forward like a tidal wave of muscle and fury. Their hooves thundered against the earth, their bellowing cries tearing through the night air. And when those campers saw them charging, the scene exploded into pure, unfiltered panic. Screams pierced the night. Tents ripped apart as people dove out of them. Coolers overturned, spilling drinks and food into the dirt. Someone dropped a speaker and the music cut off in a harsh squeal. Children wailed, adults shouted, bodies scrambled in every direction, and right at the center of it all, Karen shrieked into her megaphone, her voice cracking with hysteria. Stay calm. Don't run! They can't hurt you. But the crowd wasn't listening. Fear had taken over, and no amount of her fake authority could stop it. One man tripped over a cooler and fell flat on his face. A woman dragged her kids toward the parking lot, screaming at them to hurry. I watched from the shadows, arms folded, as my bulls surged forward, never touching a soul, just charging close enough to scatter the mob like leaves in a storm. Karen, though? She didn't move fast enough. She stood her ground too long, waving her clipboard like it was some magic shield. And when the biggest of my bulls barreled past her, the wind of his massive body sent her tumbling backward into the mud. Her white designer blouse was ruined, her hair plastered to her forehead, her clipboard snapped clean in half. She sat there stunned, covered in filth, while the rest of her army abandoned her without a second glance. Within minutes, the field was deserted. Cars peeled out in every direction, headlights cutting frantic lines through the dark. Tents were left behind, fires half extinguished, garbage scattered everywhere. And in the center of it all sat Karen, drenched, humiliated, and utterly alone. I walked up slowly, boots crunching on the trampled grass. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with fury and embarrassment. You'll regret this, she sputtered, her voice trembling. No, I said calmly. You will. I raised my phone and showed her the recording. Every second of her trespassing, every word of her speech, every scream and scramble as my bulls thundered across the field, it was all captured in crystal clarity. And tomorrow morning, it was going straight to the sheriff's department and the county council. She blanched, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. For once, she had no snappy comeback. The next week was delicious. I filed official complaints with the sheriff, backed up with hours of video evidence. The county slapped her with fines for trespassing, illegal assembly, and reckless endangerment. Parents of the kids who had been terrified that night turned their anger on her, not me. Several HOA members resigned, embarrassed to be associated with her stunt, and Karen. She disappeared from her role as HOA president practically overnight. I heard whispers that she sold her house and moved to another state. Tail tucked firmly between her legs. As for me, I stood in my field, my bulls grazing peacefully at my side. and felt a calm satisfaction wash over me. Justice wasn't always swift, and it wasn't always easy. But sometimes, with the right timing and a little help from a herd of angry bulls, it could be sweet beyond words. So if you ever feel underestimated, disrespected, or powerless, remember this: the people who trample your boundaries only win if you let them. Stand your ground. Protect what's yours. And if all else fails, unleash the bulls, because Karen, she learned the hard way. And I'll never forget the look on her face when the world she tried to control crumbled right beneath her feet.